There you go, I started.
Try to stay right there. Okay, Cougars, welcome back. This is part 3 of a 6-part series. And if you guys take a look at my website, which is up here, you guys will notice that I went ahead and took the first 2 ones that we did under photography. And they're right there. The first one is borderline unwatchable. It's really hard to teach and do all this stuff at the same time. And what I'd like to do is probably break it up into smaller pieces eventually. But if you missed any one of these segments, you can go back and watch them if you'll take a look at 1 of 6. I think it's pretty long. 2 of 6 is a little bit shorter and it's a little bit more organized. And I'm hoping today will be even better. So, oh, we don't have a mic on. That's what we're missing. We should stop that. Okay, so as I was saying, if you guys look up on my website, I put the first 2 sections up. I'm going to do that from now on with all the rest of them. This is part 3, and if we look back at our notes real quick, I like to review every time just a little bit of what happened. In the very first week, we had an intro, and we talked about the different types of cameras and equipment. Number 2, different types of photography, resources on the website, and we did talk a little bit about aspect ratio. Does anybody remember what aspect ratio most cameras shoot in? Yeah. 3:2, you got it, good job. Love you guys, all right. Next we talked about equipment and we talked about the different types of cameras. Everybody take a look back here. Does anybody remember what kind of camera this one is? This is one of the Canons that we use in class all the time, especially for shooting video. Anybody know what this one's called? Yeah, what kind? Mirrorless, meaning that it has no mirror, which means if I take the lens off, the sensor is not covered, it's right there, okay? That is your sensor. We try not to touch those because you have to clean them, right? And does anybody know what kind this one is? DSLR, which stands for? Digital single lens reflex. That's pretty good. It's right up there. You actually read it off the screen. Good job. We also talked about some vocabulary. We talked about times to shoot, golden hour, the hour before sunset, blue hour, the hour after sunset. I often do landscapes in one of those 2. If I've got a subject, I probably want to be in golden hour. Horizon line, we talked about things being balanced, and I talked about a couple of different ways to do that. But we also talked about bokeh. Most people say bokeh more like putting the emphasis on the end, like a bouquet of flowers. But if you were watching the Oscars yesterday, there was a commercial where they talked about bokeh, and they actually used it as a verb, which is totally incorrect. And they said, "I can't believe you bokeh'd my son," right? I'm glad some of you guys saw that. It just so you know, it's Japanese, it's not Spanish, which bokeh just sounds like it's Italian, right? It sounds like it'd be spelled B-O-C-O. It is B-O-K-E-H, and it is Japanese, and it just means blurred. It literally means blurred. That's all it means. So if you see that commercial and you're confused by the pronunciation, I was too. I think that she was just trying to have fun. I don't know. It was Apple, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Apple was doing it yesterday. So if you get a chance, check out the new Apple commercial. That's what you'll see. We talked about what you guys wanted to do, and then we talked about framing, horizon line, rule of thirds, composition, balance, headroom, nose room. You guys remember all that? Yes? Last week, we talked about the triangle of photography. I gave you guys a whole bunch of rules, and basically what we want to do is get to a point where we're comfortable making the camera do what we want it to, rather than the camera telling us what it wants to do. We talked about the difference between shooting in auto and in manual. And in auto, the camera is just trying to get as much light into the camera as it needs to. In order to do that, it'll often take the shutter speed down, which can blur your photos. And we just wanted you to understand that. I also went through and took a look at all of these different parts of aperture, shutter, and ISO. Today, lesson 3, we are talking about the difference of focal point versus focal length. We're going to talk about getting the camera to do what you want it to do rather than the other way around. Week 4, we're going to start Photoshop if I can get all the logins correctly inputted. And then week 5, we'll talk about portraiture and anything else that we need to, if we need to follow up with Photoshop. And then the last week, I'm hoping that we can just shoot and hopefully iron out any problems that we have with manual settings. Is everybody cool with that? Yes? Sound good? All right, so today, let's start with focal point. which is the problem you're going to run into when you guys dealt with this. So once you guys switch to manual settings, you're going to notice that you also have the ability to change your focal point. I know none of this really makes a lot of sense until you have the camera, but I'm going to have you guys come back here and kind of gather around, and I'll show you what both of these things look like. So defined in the fine arts as a point of interest that makes an artwork unique in the realm of optics, and the term focal point also refers to the site where parallel rays and light meet. This is just really, really complicated, isn't it? Yeah. This is the technical thing. I don't need you guys to write that down. Here's what it looks like. In your camera, you're going to be able to choose which one of these 9 points is your focal point. On the mirrorless cameras, there's a whole bunch of different points because you literally just touch on the screen. Now, our DSLRs are also touch screens, so the nice part is that once I access this menu, I can just click on whichever one I want. If I'm taking a picture of one single object, I typically want to use what we call single point focus as opposed to an auto manual selection. I'm going to show you those today, and I'm going to show you the difference in that. Let's take a look at focal length, which is totally something different and has an even worse definition. This is awesome. You guys are going to love this. Watch this. Let me zoom in so you guys can see this. Focal length, usually represented in millimeters, is the basic description of a photographic lens. It is not a measurement of the actual length of a lens, but a calculation of an optical distance from the point where light rays converge to form a sharp image in an object to the digital sensor or 35 millimeter film at the focal plane of the camera. It's super easy, right? Yeah, nobody needs that. Here's what I need you guys to understand. Take a look back here. Here's your camera. Here's your lens, right? This says 18. That's my focal length. This says 135. That's my focal length. Whatever this turns to. If you have a zoom lens, then whatever you're pointed to, that is your focal length. They don't draw in everything. In fact, if you look, it's 18, 24, 35, 50, 85, and 135. When you're taking portraits, you typically want to be somewhere between 80 to 100. Because this is a crop censored camera, and we talked about sensors just briefly, you probably want to be somewhere around 50. Now, if you have what's called a prime lens, and I'm going to back up just a little bit because I have this written down for you guys, and you guys can write this down if you want to. Prime lenses are not variable. You basically have to do what's cropping with your feet. So everybody take a look right here. This is a mirrorless camera, but I've switched lenses on it. This is the normal one right here. You guys see the difference? The normal lens is a zoom lens. It's not a very large zoom lens. It goes from 18 to 55, and that's it. That's what we call a kit lens. It's the one that usually comes in the kit. For some reason, whenever somebody bought these, they had a really interesting kit that I've never seen before. And I believe it came with both of these lenses. Either that or afterwards they went and bought a whole mess of these, because we have a ton of these lenses. This is a 22 2.0 lens. So that means that the focal length is 22. It doesn't zoom. It's what we call a prime lens. They're usually really fast. I don't feel like these ones are necessarily, but it is kind of cute, isn't it? It's very short, makes the camera very small, very light. They actually make lenses like this for DSLRs, and it makes them very lightweight because a lot of your weight is in this glass up here, this giant lens. In the last week that we're here, I might bring all my stuff and I can show you all the equipment too, and that'll be kind of fun and give you guys a chance to shoot with some of it. So what we call cropping with our feet is when I look through this, whatever is in my frame, that's what it is. If I want to crop it, I have to step forward, like literally walk towards the subject or walk back. That's the only way to get a different framing with this kind of lens. It just kind of is what it is. But they're cool. Prime lenses are really great and they have their purpose. But that's the focal length. Pretty easy, right? Okay. In order to find out what our focal length is, we can actually figure it out by looking up the photo's EXIF. EXIF, it's hard to say, sorry. EXIF. EXIF. It stands for Exchangeable Image File Format. You can write that down if you'd like to. Most people don't know what it stands for, just like DSLR. But I'm going to show you how to find it real quick. And we're going to take a look at some pictures today and show you the difference between the two things. So, And I'm not sure if I can get it on everything, but it seems to be the easiest way to do is to go to Photos. I actually tried it earlier by going into here and just right-clicking, hitting Get Info. That doesn't really do it for you. It gives you a lot of information, but not what we want. And if I go to View, actually here, I have to go into here. I have to open up the picture. If I go to Tools and go Show Inspector, which is what you're supposed to do, it doesn't really show me a whole lot. Cool? So what I found out is the easiest way to seem to get it consistently is to go to Photos. Once we're in Photos, oh look, puppies. We should be able to just right-click on it, hit Get Info, and we can find out everything that we need to know about this. Can you guys see that at all? No? I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on that. Look, it's a big puppy. There you go. Okay. So I'm going to come over here to where it says all of the information. This was taken with a Canon EOS Rebel T4i, which is this camera right here, right? That's what took this photo. The lens on it was an EF S18 to 135. That is our focal range on this lens because it is an 18 to 135 lens, right? And it says that right on the lens. The f-stop is 3.5 to 5.6, and when we started talking about equipment in the last few weeks, or one of the last 2 weeks, I know I mentioned to you guys that when you're at 18, right, that's when the lens is wide open. That is the widest open aperture that you can have, which is 3.5. But when you zoom in, it's automatically, even if you have the camera set up in manual to be at 3.5, it'll automatically take it to 5.6 because that is the widest open you can be within that focal length. So when you're at 135, that's the widest open your aperture can be. Does anybody remember aperture a little bit? Kind of. Do we need to review that again?
Like how wide the lens are open and how much light lets in.
So when we talk about aperture, I still like to go back to here because I feel like it's easiest. Remember, it's the distance between this white space and the edge of the black space here. So from there to there, on there it's easier. It's literally from the opening to the edge. In here it's 32, and here it's f22, 16, 11, right? The lower the number, the bigger the opening, which means the shallower the depth of field or the more blurred the background is. And that's why this chart's so easy to see. Anybody have any questions about aperture? You guys okay? Can I move on? Yes? Okay. Let's go back to here where I was. Let's go back to our puppies. And you can see all the information. So it actually tells you the resolution. This is actually 1.6 megabytes. That's the size of the file. This is the actual resolution here. It is in JPEG format. And if we look down below, here's all of our information. This was shot at ISO 100. It was all the way zoomed out to 135. That is the focal what? Point or length? Length. That's all we're talked about so far. I haven't really shown you guys point that much. It was what aperture? 7.1, just happened to be that. If you're outside in broad daylight, you probably want a better aperture than that, maybe something even more closed down. But that's just what I happen to be at. And what's my shutter speed? How would you say that? How fast is that? It's 1/320th of a second. Is that fast? Yeah, super fast, right? Now, is that fast in terms of photography? Not really, because we can go all the way to 1/4000, which would be 1/4000th of a second, right? That's what our cameras are mostly capable of, or maybe 2000. I don't know. Where it depends on your camera, which one you have, where it stops at. But we can go a lot higher. If I'm shooting outside broad daylight and I'm shooting action, I'm going to be 1/500th or greater. So I'm usually about 1/1000th of a second. It's hard to say that, I know. 1/1000th of a second. This is EXIF. It shows you the focal length, which is awesome. You guys want to look at a couple more real quick? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Let me go back. There's a whole bunch of pictures of all kinds of things. Hey, look, it's Luna. Let's take a look at Luna here. And again, if I just right click and hit Get Info, I'll zoom it in so you guys can see. Check this out. This was taken with a Canon EOS Rebel SL1. That's one of my other cameras that I don't own anymore. I just gave it to my dad for Christmas. It's a Canon EFS 55 to 250 lens, f4 to 5.6. That tells you what the lens specs are. And then down here is what I shot at. I was shooting this ISO 1600, 100 millimeters was my focal length, f8, 1/640th of a second. And what do those settings give you? Gives you a really happy puppy, right? Everybody like happy puppies? Oops, let me go back to photos, sorry. Meant to hit that one. So when we're talking about focal length, what you want to do is single point focus, especially if we're going to do macro or portrait photography. If I'm doing something like this, I want everything in focus. But if I'm going to do something which uses bokeh, I want to have a very particular focal length and I want to use one point of focus. Often when I'm taking portraits of like my niece here, you'll notice that she's in focus, nothing else is. That's a low aperture, shallow depth of field, and single point focus. And that's why I'm teaching both at the same time, is you use them both together. If you guys take a look at this one, can you tell what is in focus and what is not? Which flower? There's a lot of them there. The one right in front is in focus. These ones are not. You'll notice that this one's a little bit in focus. And so this is our point of focus, and then the focus dissipates or become more blurred or bokeh as we go back away from that point of focus. If I've got two kids, I want everything in focus, but the background's actually not. It's out of focus. I'm sorry, I keep closing out. Tink. I don't use iPhoto a lot. I'm gonna have to get used to that. There we go. Now some photos will not give you an EXIF, like for example, some of the things down here that I might have pulled off the internet. They might not have... Do you like the cheeseburger? That's actually not one of mine. Where is that? Oh, where'd you see that? Oh, okay. We already missed it. Sorry, we already passed it. Can't have that. If you guys look at something like these birds, you can't tell if everything is out of focus because it's just the sky, so you have no idea. You have to have a point of reference. In here, these guys are more blurred, the bird is more in focus. Oh man, I did it again. I gotta stop doing that. This is gonna make it really hard to edit this, sorry. There we go. When you guys are taking portraits, you have to be in mind what's behind the person, otherwise it looks like something might be coming out of their head. Obviously I did that on purpose, but it's easy to do. I don't like this shot because the ring is supposed to be in focus, which it is, but it's down so low in the frame. It should be in the center of the framing, and I almost feel like we're trying to take a picture of this jewel instead of the ring, which is what it should be, but oh well. That's me behind somebody who just ran a marathon. I'm out of focus, they're in focus. All of these people are out of focus. That's that single point. And I don't know if I've got the folder that I want. Let's take a look and see if I've got that other folder. Is that the one you wanted? You had one job to do. That's what that is. That was just a funny picture. It's like you couldn't even get it in the middle of the sandwich. What were you doing? That looks like it was too hot and it got stuck. Oh, there we go. I think these are some of the ones. So, what's in focus? Yeah, these are actually like Kit Kats and Snicker bars that are chopped up in a trifle. You can see the ones over here, very shallow depth of field. This is probably, I don't think I have any EXIF information on this. Let's try it. Nope, I don't think I did. So these are by a friend of mine that does a lot of product photography. Really cool stuff. Very shallow depth of field. That's what they like to do. This one was for a wine ad. You can see this is in focus. Actually, it's like right here, huh? It's almost hard to tell sometimes what the point of focus is, but that's single point. Can you tell which one's in focus? The one right in the center, which is probably where we want it to be. I think this leaf over here. And this is more macro stuff, right? The bulb for Christmas, which I tried to pretty much copy that shot. This one doesn't have a signature on it, but I don't think it's mine, though I have shots that are just like that. And then somebody asked me about taking pictures of the rain, and I said, well, you could always do this. What's in focus? The drops on your windshield, right? I don't know what this is a picture of. Oh, this is just wonky horizon line that we were talking about. Remember that? And how close do you want to be to a lion? That's not one of mine. I'll show you mine if I have it in here. I don't know. You see another line in here? There he is. This one is mine. And I can tell you where I took that and the focal length, because I know the focal length on this one's 300. It was the biggest lens that I had at the time to keep myself as far away from the lion as possible, right? You don't want to be close to lions. That's a bad idea. This is my niece hugging a tree. Here she is laying down. And here she is coming out of a lipstick holder, because I thought that was funny. Yeah? All right. All right, so does everybody kind of understand the idea? You guys want to look at more pictures? You guys okay?
Yeah.
That one's really hard to do. Obviously, did I have to get a slow shutter speed or a quick shutter speed for this one? Very quick. He did it several times, jumped up and down, and we finally caught him. What about something like this one we talked about before? Is that a long shutter speed or a slow shutter speed? Or a fast? Very long, right? That was 30 seconds. Which means that the camera just sat there for 30 seconds. And if you think 30 seconds sounds really fast, it is, in considering the fact that we, sit around a lot more than that. But when you're waiting for a camera to take a picture, that's super slow. When it comes to single point focus, it allows me to do really cool things. This was some product photography, and obviously the point I'm focusing on is right there. This is for a Glassblower, and they wanted me to come and shoot some of their stuff that was in the gallery. And you can see the rest of it is, what do we call this? Just bokeh, right? No, I'm just kidding. It still sounds weird every time I say it. All right, everybody go ahead and let's get up. Come on back here. Something. All right. Hey, cool. We got theater of the round. When you're looking at the DSLR cameras, I'm going to show you guys first, and then I'm going to just put it around. You have to start to understand your equipment and all the buttons on it. So like when you brought in your camera, we started playing with all the buttons and making sure we could do what we wanted to it. If we're in manual mode, we've got shutter right on top. This changes the shutter speed, and you can see that I can go all the way up to 1/4000th of a second. That's what that measurement is right there. Does everybody see that? See that right there? 1/4000th of a second. On the very top, there's a button that says what?
ISO.
ISO. You just hit it. Again, touchscreen makes it so nice. I just click on it. Highest I can go is 12,800. But we probably don't want to do that. That's probably not even usable. 6,400 is usually what we see, right? That's usually the max. And even then, sometimes it's a bit rough. Remember that the higher the ISO, the more grain we're going to have in our pictures. What was the last one? We had 3 things in our triangle photography. What was the last one? We had shutter speed, ISO, f-stop or aperture. If you guys look over here, I can actually hit this button and it'll switch my arrows over. See, right now by default it's on the shutter speed, but if I hit this button it goes straight over to f-stop, and then I can just adjust that too using that same dial as long as I hold down with that. I can also come in here and hit the Q, which allows me to just touch screen everything. Same deal, right? You guys see that? So I'll do it again. I'm holding down AV button right here, and then it'll go to it. I'm gonna go back out. Because we have a touch screen, we can go like that and just hit it, or go back to shutter speed. ISO, same thing. All 3 of them are right there. Shortcut's really nice. All right, so once you have those 3 functions down and we have them all set up, there's still one more thing that we didn't have a chance to talk about last week, and that was these buttons over here by your thumb. Right over here by your thumb, you have 2 buttons. When I hit them, one of them does nothing in this mode except puts me into quick mode, which quick view. The one on the right is the one that we want, and that's that screen I was showing you guys earlier, right? And this will tell the camera which focal point you want to use. Now in these cameras, which are not very expensive, there's only 9 points. And I can actually put it on automatic, which means just put everything in focus, and it'll try to do that for you. Or I can hit it and I can literally just touch on whichever one of these points I want. So if I've got somebody all the way on the right-hand side of the frame, and I want that to be in focus, I can put that point. If I'm shooting a portrait, I might want to click on the left one and then turn my camera so that that point is right on their eye, right? Or I might want to go in the center because I'm taking a picture of a flower, and that's the point that I want to use. When I look through the lens, what I'm going to see is a red dot. Every time I hold this lens down just a little bit, I will see a red dot, and I just put that red dot right on someone's face, and I can ensure that they are going to be in focus, right? In this case, I need my ISO higher. There we go, and I'll put this down. Let's try that again. Look at those eyes, oh my gosh, right? That's an awesome picture. Now you notice that I zoomed in to shoot that. There you go. And I was at focal length about 85. This is a crop sensor camera, so at 85, I don't even know what that comes to, but over 100, right? But the rest of it looks pretty good. You can see a little bit of shadows beneath his eyes. If I wanted to fix that, no problem. I got flash too, right? Just flash him. Of course, at that ISO, there you go. That takes care of everything, right? Makes him look super bright. All right. So that's your focal length and your focus point. Now, on more expensive cameras, instead of having 9 autofocus points, you might have as many as 40. And so this is one of the selling features that people have when you buy more expensive cameras. They say, well, this one has this many frames per second, this many focus points, all of that. And obviously, the more you spend, the more you get. On a mirrorless camera, it's a little bit simpler. I have this set up in manual exposure. I can zoom in, and all I'm going to do is take my finger, put it on the touch screen, and it'll focus on whatever I want to focus on. If I hold it steady, should be able to get a pretty good shot, but I really need to bump up the ISO on this one. Oh, I got everything else down too. So I'm going to go to bump up the ISO. I'm going to use the same, pretty much the same settings that I had for the other one. Let's see if I can get the same result. Ready? He's going to make the same face for it. You'll notice that with this camera, it takes a little bit more for it to focus. Right? The autofocus is on all the time. Sorry, there you go. Right? You guys just like laughing at each other. But you don't need to manually select anything on here. You literally just sit there and it'll do it. Most of the time, these cameras will automatically adjust to whatever is closest to the lens or whatever is brightest. Sometimes those are the same thing. The problems we run into is that when you've got something behind you that's brighter than the rest of it, it might focus on that, and then your subject will be out of focus. So that's what we need to understand. Anybody have any questions? Everybody good? Cool. Okay, so that is the end of lesson 3, which was focal length versus focal point and EXIF. So join me next week, and we'll be talking about hopefully Photoshop. Yes?
Yes.
Yay! Cool?
Yep.
All right.